with Pete Mento and Doug Draper.
Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Trade this week. It is Tuesday, March 16th. We are excited to see you again for the Trade this week brought to you by Logistics. And I'm joined, as always, by my intrepid co-host, Mr. Doug Draper. We're sorry that it took us a little longer than usual to get back to you with another fine edition. But for those of you who are not watching the news, Denver, Colorado was besieged upon by, I guess, what can only be called this year's version of Snowmageddon. Just how much snow do you think you got, Doug?
Well, it depends on where you ask, and it depends on how the numbers factor out, right? Mountains were in the upper 30s as far as inches. Denver was probably 22-ish. Foothills, a little bit more. So, yeah, it's not about the main streets. It's about the side streets. You can't get out of your neighborhood and everything. But we are here, and I'm looking out a window with semi trucks covered with snow right now, but we're getting her done.
Wow. Well, here in New Hampshire, we've had really high winds the last couple of weeks. And when I say high winds, I'm talking rattle the windows of my apartment, knock stuff over everywhere. Auntie M, it's a twister kind of high winds. And it's been, 9 degrees below zero with the wind chill. And I've had it, man. I've had it. I need my 1 bedroom in Molokai with bad internet reception. I need to move to someplace warm, and I need to just drink rum and write my memoirs and just get it over with.
Yeah. Yeah, in about 6 months, you'll be complaining about the humidity and how much you want fall to hit. So that's just the circle of life.
I will not be. No. I've the pandemic, the pandy, the cocoa, as it were, has turned me into a man who appreciates being outside more than ever. I want to ride my motorcycle. I want to ride my bicycle, and I want to go swimming. You have not lived until you've seen this in a bathing suit. But as that were the case, Doug, I know you have a fantastic first, which we are not going to agree on. I'm telling you right now. You have a fantastic first topic for us to discuss. So why don't you go ahead and light this candle and let's get to it.
All right. So I'm going to have to read some specific quotes to really underscore my point in this, right? So this is like a month ago, Pete. This is an actual quote from the Postmaster General, DeJoy, specifically saying the postal system is in a death spiral and needs legislation to help restore it to financial stability. So there's a couple things there. Who the heck uses death spiral to describe their business? Not anybody that's a leader, in my opinion. Secondly, The solution to the problem is to go to the government to ask money because they need legislation to get them out of the problem. That whole statement right there is fundamentally the issue that's going on with the USPS and the post office literally for a decade. Right. And then you have these other forces that are coming into play. Amazon's coming in with, with their delivery service. And the post office is participating in the e-commerce play, but they got the shitty part of the deliveries, right? They got the final mile. The revenue is the large amounts of product you move across the country to the final mile, and then everything gets dispersed. And you're rolling down these dirt roads in western Kansas or eastern Colorado that are not profitable. Doesn't matter how much business and volume you throw in there. And then you factor in the technology, which, I don't know, a guy's got to download a hand cradle to give you a status update that's, 24 hours delayed. That doesn't play in 2021. And then it just seems to me that there's a lack of awareness and urgency. And as long as that is in a government mindset, things move quick. And we talked about the pandemic being an accelerator. We're going to put this thing into high gear, and the post office is just going to be completely irrelevant, right? I'm going to read one more quote here, Pete. I could read a couple more, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can give me your feedback. So this is another quote from like a month ago, all right? It says, we believe the growth in domestic mobile e-commerce sales will continue to outpace the growth of brick and mortar, yada, 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 right? It's the same stuff that we were talking about years ago. And I think DeJoy sent that statement on a fax machine because it's 10 years old, and that's how far out of touch this entity is, right? So I truly believe in some form or fashion, the post office is going to be non-existent in 5 years if they keep having this mentality and read press releases in death spirals, and the only way out of it is to ask money from the government. Been there, done that. People are tired of it. It needs to have a different mentality, a different approach, and people are going to pass them by. And anyway, I could go on and on, my friend. So tossing it over to you. What's your take?
Well, first of all, this is reminiscent of so much that drives me crazy. Your screed was nothing but complaints, Doug. I didn't hear your solve. I didn't hear your.
I don't
your
know
resolution.
what the solve. I don't know what the solve is.
Okay, well then you're like every other American business person complaining about the Postal Service. You've got this litany of complaints, but you've got no way to resolve it. You've got no way. You're talking about an organization that on the daily literally touches every American household and every single business. It is a Herculean task, and they're doing it, and they are regulatorily hamstrung. So just give me a second here, all right? Death spiral was a poor choice of words. I will absolutely give you that. And then you bring up this concept of, a solution to the problem involving the government. I hate to be a dink here, but DHL, UPS, and FedEx had a real problem too, and that was that they were importing all these products without powers of attorney. And they went to the government and had a new distinction to their business that allows them to do that and, circumvent regulations that other customs house brokers don't have to use. And it's worked out extremely well for them, right? Another regulatory change that happened was Amazon.com didn't necessarily like where the de minimis was, so they put pressure on the Obama administration in the trade bill in 2016 to increase the de minimis from $200 to $800. That was another change that has served them extremely well through regulation. The Postal Service is hamstrung because of rules about mail that were put in place to keep them from doing exactly what DHL and FedEx have done, which is overtake international markets. They can only market themselves so much in these overseas places. They've been trying to get changes to this forever because the reality is they bump freight on international flights. I mean, most people don't know that. If you've got a mail shipment and I've got, the latest edition of Furbies that every little kid wants, your Furbies sit so that the mails can go across during the holidays. And that is an unfair advantage that, if properly marketed, is going to stuff companies like DHL, UPS, FedEx, and every other freight forwarder. And also, their stuff moves at a lower rate than other people. They need a regulatory advantage. They need people to allow them to compete on the same level, because until they get that, they are in deep, deep trouble. Now, above all that comes layers and layers of bureaucracy that also are from years and years of regulatory, morass. So do I think that, and this is me talking, I'm with you when it comes to this, inserting regulatory issues and bringing the government into any problem is usually like inserting bleach into a cocktail. It's never going to fix it. But this is a place where actually removing regulation by including government and interaction, I think would actually help a great deal. Because I think about mail services around the world and the money they're making. The Swiss Postal Service is incredibly involved in final mile and incredibly involved in e-commerce sales. Chinese Post is one of the leading movers of what's going on right now with de minimis shipments around the world. And Deutsche Post is basically the world's largest freight forwarder. I mean, they own DHL. So why is it that we can't have the U.S. Postal Service as engaged? I don't know how to break it to you guys, but it's because of regulatory involvement. And I would venture to say that some of that might have to do with some significant money and lobbying that's done by some of the largest transportation companies in America. So there, dropping the mic. I'm going to be that guy, right? That is money and politics involved in what is an age-old way for Americans to get their mail. In the United Kingdom, within our lifetime, people are still getting mail twice a day. In this country, you're lucky if you get it on Saturday still.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think paradigm shift, right? I don't disagree. And I'm just baffled that the leadership says we're in a death spiral and our best solution is to ask for more money. That nothing's going to change. It's going to be problematic. But here's the benefit of this show, Pete. There's the yin and the yang. I think there's some commonalities in both of our statements, and we have 3 more to go. So I'm going to volley this thing across the net. Let you go with number 1 on yours, my friend.
Yeah, it's a tough one. So I try to stay away from politics, and I'm probably going to wade a little deeper than I want to right now. We have a real problem right now in the world with what can only be described as the Chinese actions with their Uigher population, and what's going on with what's really forced labor and a humanitarian crisis with a part of their primarily, traditionally culturally Muslim population that is being forced into labor all over the country. They were used to overcome a major Chinese problem, which is cotton production and the ongoing long line cotton production within China. And I'm not going to get into the deep topic of the whole Uighur crisis in China. You can read about that and watch more about that in other places. Where it's becoming a big problem in our world has to do with cotton, and how cotton and Uighur trade, anything that has to do with their involvement now, is being closely watched, particularly in America. If you are importing basically anything that could have been touched by that community, customs is coming down on you like a load of bricks. So it's at the point now where anything that's cotton that may have had origin cotton in China, customs is just making the assumption that population of people who are really being just subjugated and repressed probably had their hands on it at some point, and they're forcing American businesses to show that they have some sort of provenance, some kind of a supply chain that they can show from start to finish that did not have its hands touched by that Uighur community. I think this is a place where technology is going to come into play. I think this is another place where we're probably going to see our industry have to come up with a solution, because this is a massive problem. And this is another place where the forced labor issues and the political turmoil and problems in China are going to end up coming back to bite them in the backside. We have a very liberal president right now who is taking human rights issues seriously, and I think it's going to be U.S. Customs that ends up enforcing those problems.
Yeah. Yeah, I was not aware of the situation over there, Pete, until we talked about it this morning. And when I dove in a little bit, it's completely very unfortunate, and I can see the situation. Here's what I thought of, right? Whatever you had brought that to my attention, is the old commercial from a company called BASF, which says, "We don't make the things that you buy, we make the things that you buy better." And I think that there's going to be a realization that there's a lot of products, yes, the clothes that we have on, the hats that you wear, that may not realize how much cotton impacts what's going on in the materials that we purchase beyond a t-shirt that you get at a rock show, hopefully this summer. So I think that is going to be the ripple effect, kind of like the supply chain chaos that's going on. So I think that that's going to hit here pretty quick. And the other thing is the transparency in the supply chain that you made mention of, with the absolute mandate of these larger e-tailers, retailers really understanding where does their products come from. And if it lands squarely in that region of China, all bets are off, because of the way that the government is approaching those type of things, and there's going to be a fallout. So I think what's going to happen in the middle of summer, it's going to be like, why is this t-shirt, why is this item so expensive or so hard to come by? So I think it's one of those things that you've uncovered, that the unintended consequences that of the situation. So I agree 100%, my friend.
Yeah, you brought this up a lot, right? There are a lot of constraints right now, whether it's chip manufacturing, whether it's congestion. We've got a lot of things that are slowing us down, and now we have a political force in DC that's taking environmental policy seriously. It's taking forced labor seriously. It's taking a lot of those things seriously, and it's going to end up in either sanctions or tariffs, I think. And I think American companies need to take that seriously. So that brings us to halftime here at the Cap Logistics Global Trade This Week show. Thank you again to Cap Logistics and everyone there for putting this on for us week after week. You can learn more about Cap Logistics at www.caplogistics.com. That's what people in the business call a mid-reel spot, a mid-roll reel spot right there. So Doug, it is halftime. Yep, and it's time for your next topic. You have another excellent one for us here at number 3, so go ahead and take it.
Yeah. So we're going to take this one a little bit lighter, a little topic, a little lighter, but it's all about dogs, my friend. And I think that what I'm referring to is cargo screening, right? Obviously, there's some legislation coming down that if you're putting cargo on a passenger plane and all the regulations, it needs to be, inspected for, for explosives and things of that nature. And when that discussion happened years ago, there was a huge race to say how much these machines cost. And, oh my God, it's a multi-million-dollar investment. But if we do it, then we're going to get all the cargo going through our facility and we're going to make a killing. Well, when you peel back all that craziness and you realize what's at our disposal, which happens to be dogs and animals. And I didn't realize this, but there is a entity called the Third Party Canine Cargo Program, 3P Canine, and it's getting some momentum. So I love it because it's simple, it's easy. And one of the cool things is the detection system is mobile, right? You can just take the dog to the freight. You don't have to take the freight to the dog, which is going to allow for expediting the requirement. It's going to reduce the overall cost. So here's the one piece of that, Pete, is you just can't go out and get a dog and tell him to start sniffing, right? You got to train him. You have to get him certified, and there's some hoops you got to jump through. So if you're interested in doing that, or the government, you just can't flip the switch and say, I'm going to go down to the pound and get me Fido. So, it's a 90+ day process, but I love it. I think the idea is phenomenal. I think it's a great tactic to use, and it's not this huge expense, and it's going to help the general public. It's going to speed things through. And I'm all for it, man. What do you think? You a dog lover or a cat lover? I think that's the first question.
I love animals. I'm allergic to cats, but I dig them. I'm a big believer that if cats weighed twice as much as they do, they try to eat us in our sleep. But I love dogs, and this is a thing I believe a lot in. So for those of you that aren't aware, a lot of my academic work has been on counterterrorism, how it affects the supply chain, the financial impact of terrorism on the supply chain. And this is one of those things that I've gotten to watch because I was shocked by it. If you go to any TAPA conference, if you go to any PCSC meeting, you're going to see the dog people. And it's one of my favorite things, man. Like it's one of my favorite things when I go to these conferences is you go to the floor where they're doing all the trade show floor stuff, and there's going to be all these people that have their dogs with them. And at first, when you first see them, you're like, oh, so is this like for the people sniffing bombs at the airports? And they say, no, man, these are cargo dogs, and they smell for bombs and cargo. And then you don't even have to bring the dog to the cargo anymore. They have these machines where they do vacuums of the air around the cargo, and they put them in tubes, and they bring them out to the dog, and the dog sniffs the tube of the air. It comes back to you, and they'll tell you, no, there wasn't anything there. And it's not like there's specific breeds. They use mixed breeds. They have, all these dogs that do it. And I guess it's really cost effective. They're not. So it's inexpensive. It's using something that people generally feel very comfortable around. They're really effective. I guess they're even more effective than the machines. And the people that are using them, that form a bond with these dogs, they take it really seriously. A lot of them are former military. A lot of them are former law enforcement. So you have like a heightened sense of it's not some contractor who just came off the ground that doesn't necessarily have as deep an affection for what we're trying to get after. And I think one of the things you just brought up a minute ago is it's repeatable. We're not going to run out of dogs anytime soon. It's a 90-day process, and we can teach people to do this. And you talk about dog lovers, we're always going to find people that probably want to work with dogs in these environments to go and do the work. I think it's an excellent way to go after this. I think it's a brilliant way to deal with a lot of problems all at once. And I think we're going to see more and more of it as people become more comfortable with the fact that it's an effective an extremely effective and cost-effective way to deal with the problem.
Yeah. No, I love it. You'd mentioned, there's never going to be a shortage of dogs. And this is one of the reasons why I brought this topic up. And I'm going to read this one because it has relevance to you and your educational background. But this is not a joke or a punchline, right? So I'm reading this. It's related to COVID. Quote, "The strategic monkey reserve is exactly what we needed to deal with COVID. We just didn't have it." This is a guy named Keith Reeves, principal investigator at the Center of Yada 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 Vaccine Research at Harvard Medical School. Now, he basically says that we need to create a strategic monkey reserve. So whenever they need to do some testing that they will be readily available. So there was a monkey shortage related to testing of COVID. And
Wow.
I bring that up because, monkeys, I don't know about pets, man, it's a little bit different, but it's another example of how animals are used. I'm sure there's humane treatment. I'm sure everything is cool with the monkeys. But when I read that one, that there is a strategic monkey reserve, somebody is lobbying for a strategic monkey reserve, and his name happens to be connected to Harvard Med School. Pete, what do you think of that?
No, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, the fact remains that for a lot of this testing, they use mice because I guess they're so close to us genetically, and all these different types of monkeys. I really hate animal testing, but I understand all of that. But you're right. It's not like they have a whole bunch waiting in the wings in case we have the next pandemic. I had a long conversation this weekend about how this really wasn't, everyone talks about how in 2017, I gave this speech about the economics of pandemics. This was not a full-blown economic pandemic. Everyone needs to get that out of their head, right? We dealt with this very well. This was not the global economic crisis that it should have been. This was not the Spanish flu, right? This was not the mortality rates that we expected. The next one will be, but this was our dress rehearsal. This was us getting ready for the real one. And I hope we learned our lesson. So yeah, monkey reserves and all the rest of it, we should be learning to get ready for the next real big one when it happens. Because this was not the big pandemic. This was our attention getter. That's what this was.
Yeah. Well, if I send you a text message and say, let's get into the monkey business, you don't have to read too much into that. Yeah. All right. Yeah. We got to shift. We got to get this thing back on track. So we're going to finish up. Pete, you got one more for us.
Yeah. Another one that's a little bit, I guess, controversial, but I'm going to put my weight behind it. And it's another one that's political. So Senator Mike Lee from Utah has recently introduced legislation that would really, it would shift the power of tariffs farther away from the president and more into the hands of Congress. Right now, when we have issues like the 301 tariffs and what went on with Europe and was recently reversed with regards to Airbus, it's really in the hands of the president. Both Mr. Obama and Mr. Trump had put some emergency tariffs in place to deal with issues. Mr. Obama put them on steel belted radials as a political favor to the ironworkers, steelworkers unions. And of course, Mr. Trump went hog wild on a bunch of different issues with regards to China and intellectual property issues. And what Mr. Lee is hoping to do in this instance is to not allow that level of power to disrupt global commerce be in the hands of just one man, and to have some type of input from Congress. And that's where it gets a little vague. He doesn't say that Congress has to vote on it. He doesn't say that Congress has to have a majority of votes. He's just saying that Congress needs to have some input, and that input has not been defined. So I'm going to watch this one pretty closely. I think it would be interesting if there was, say, a Senate subcommittee or congressional subcommittee that had to review something before the president did it, before it went to the USTR and gave opinions on it before that happened. I don't know if we're ever going to be in a situation again where Congress has to vote on trade bills like we did before Smoot-Hawley, because that was an absolute train wreck. There are too many people involved that have too many opinions that can sway an important trade deal. That's why a president and his cabinet have the right to go out there and negotiate it. But I think some input on matters like the 301s is warranted because of the power it can have on the global economy. I just don't think that they should have the right to completely halt it. Because just because the guy who had it last did something you don't like, doesn't mean that we shouldn't change it just because we're worried about what could happen the next time.
Yeah. Pete, 100%. I think the one thing, I love it. I agree 100%. The one thing that gives me pause a little bit is the end of the proposition, if you will, seems a little bit vague. Like you said, part of me is like, let's get a vote. But as you indicated, that's just going to go into a spiral and nothing's going to happen. And a lot of these things are reactionary that need to be taking place in the moment in order to get a result. And you throw that, I mean, look at the COVID payments, right? I mean, my gosh, they've been talking about it forever. So I like the hybrid, but if it's too ambiguous on the back end and it's not defined on who is doing the review and how is their feedback going to be presented, that could be problematic. But absolutely agree 100%, and I love the idea.
All right, man. Well, take us out of here, buddy. Another. Yep. Yeah.
So next week we'll be back in on Monday, barring any snowstorms in New Hampshire or Denver. It's springtime, so I think we're getting out of it. But I want to thank Cap Logistics again for putting this all together. All of the little verbiage you have and the topic headers on the bottom of our screen, that's all put together by Cap and their team. So as Pete mentioned, visit caplogistics.com. Great resource for you out there. So Pete, we'll hook up with you on Monday. I want to thank you again for your input. We had a great dichotomy of opinions and topics this week. So this was a good one. I appreciate it.
Anytime, Doug. I'll talk to you soon, pal.
All right. Take care.
See you.